Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you for the release of the book Decoding India's Defence Procurement. We are very thankful to General Shankar Rai Chaudhary, former Chief of the Army Staff and Member of Parliament, to be present here for release of the book, and also thankful to all the guests who have come despite the busy schedule. I'm sure most of us are interested in the subject, so we are looking forward to a good interaction. To start with the proceedings, may I request General N.C. Vij, Director, Vivekananda International Foundation, to give his introductory remarks. General Vij.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad to see a lot of familiar faces in the participants of the audience today. At the very outset, I'd like to extend a very hearty welcome and warm welcome to General Shankar Rai Chaudhary, our former chief, who's very kindly come down all the way from Calcutta to release this book. We are indeed grateful to you, sir, for this. More than you have taken because you're going back immediately after the release. Alright. I am also very grateful to all of you for having come down here in reasonable number. It's a great source of encouragement, and I'm very happy to see the uniform fraternity, because this book has been mainly prepared for the benefit of you people, and I do hope that you will find it useful. Now, as far as the subject is concerned, despite several initiatives by the various governments over a period of time have been wasted, and their goal to attain self-reliance has been elusive because of two factors. One, that 70% of our armament is imported, and secondly, we've not been able to set up a wide base of technology and production capacity in our country, despite all our effort. And secondly, even when the government is prepared to spend a lot of money, the progress in procurement has been sluggish and tardy. And this is again because of a number of factors. Firstly, because the process of decision making in procurement itself is very complex. And secondly, because there are pressures of all kinds on this particular subject from all around. And thirdly, now of late, people have become somewhat chary in taking decisions, and even both the bureaucracy and the leadership is a victim of that kind of a mental attitude. And of course, in India, the implementation has never been a strong point. One more issue I'd like to touch upon, and that is the issue of obsolescence of the equipment, the upgradation and the maintenance, which has been very poor, and which has been outside the capacity of the government agencies and the services agencies which are there, and which have not been really paying much attention to. Fortunately, the Ministry of Defence, in the effort that they have put in now, in this particular case, my old postman, so I don't forget that. So, fortunately, the MOD has now taken measures to make sure that all these anomalies are rectified, and through the issuance of DPP 2013. And incidentally, there will be six such revision of the DPP. Even though it has been a reasonably good effort, I think it has fallen short in few expectations. And that is perhaps not their own problem, but that is the problem of trying to tinker with the policies. You can only really make some improvements. I think what is required is a bold initiatives which are out of the box thinking, and which cut across the the parties and the political parties and go away from the partisan thinking, and they are beyond that. It's for that reason that we in the VIF set up a team to study this particular aspect, and they worked over 2 months, and As a result of that 2 month effort, where they have come out with certain analysis and recommendations, we have converted that to a book, and that is the book which is under release today. And I'd like to show you the composition of that theme. And there is the team which did the study, and all of them are present here today. And you will also hear some of them and a presentation by some of them during the course of the proceeding today before we go on to the question and answer session. Thank you.
May I now request the Chief Guest, Shankar Roy Chaudhary, kindly release the book.
Still.
Thank you very much, sir. We will now proceed with the presentations by some of the significant contributors to the study, and they will also give you an overview of the salient aspects which have been covered. First, we'll start with General J.P. Singh. May I request you, sir, to come over, and he will be speaking on generally the overall ops management, which, as you well know, is one of the critical areas of defense procurement. General J.P. Singh.
Just Shankar shortly, sir. Your way, sir, our chiefs, ladies and gentlemen. The DPP 2013 got promulgated on 1st of June 2013 with the primary objective of expediting the capital procurement as also developing a robust indigenous defense industrial base. Now, towards the same, it lays down the provisions which I believe is to horizontally link 3 verticals, namely the first vertical being the acquisition procedures, second being the production, and third is the technology. So, to horizontally link them, and in addition to that, with the defense production policy of 2011 and the offset policy of 2012, which finds itself in print in the DPP 2013, are to act as a catalyst to developing the defense industrial base. Now, to give a flip to the indigenization, right at the inception stage, the DPP 2013 came with a major amendment to say that in your statement of case which you bring forward to the SCAP committees as also to the DSE, you'll have to justify the categorization with the priority being first given to Buy Indian, and thereafter Buy and Make Indian, Make, then you say Buy and Make, and last would be to go globally to buy. So you have to justify as to why the indigenous industry is not being given the first preference towards the same. In addition to that, there are various amendments, more so in order to hasten the thing up. There was a shelf life laid to the AON, plus also the SQR, etc., would all have to be made, including the scaling, etc., done before the services take up a case to be accepted as a necessity and fall into list A of the AAP. Now, added to that, one of the important addition, like I said, in 2013 was that the offset policy of 2012 now gets printed into it, and this actual policy takes into consideration the best of the international practices as applicable to India. Now, here the main objective of the offset is to actually leverage the high value capital acquisition to develop the international competitive enterprises, your own Indian defense base, plus also augment the capacity for research and development, and also synergize the other two sectors, namely the aerospace and the internal security. Now, though the offsets came into existence in 2005, they got operationalized in 2008, and till 2014, only 24 offsets worth about $4.87 billion have been contracted, and another 44 offsets are in progress, worth about $15 to $16 billion. Actually, in this field, we haven't done well, and that is one of the reasons where this particular offset policy now came in to make the offsets a little easier. However, it is my belief and our study team's belief that offset really have suffered because of a lack of understanding and a non-proactive move. We left the offsets to the vendors that this is your headache, now you go ahead and service this, give me your technical evaluation and give me your commercial evaluation, and thereafter I am there to monitor. And I am sitting there with rules and regulations. Now, keeping this particular anomaly in view, a major change in the organization took place. Therein, certain other things came in to add a degree of flexibility as to how the offsets can be serviced by the vendors in terms of defining the Indian offset partners, and adding on, in order to get certain technologies, the various categories under which the offsets can be given. So this particular theme or our chapter on the offsets, which is an important passage, really speaking analyzes the complete offset policy of 2012, and thereafter gave our recommendation primarily to say that we need a very professional staff and the continuity of the staff if you want to progress on. Though the Defense Offset Management Wing, so-called the DOW, got created in place of the DOPA, but it still, to our analysis, lacks the desired organization and definitely the professional needs which need to go in, and you can't be doing on-the-job training if you're going to be handling at a rate of nearly $8 billion worth of capital acquisition every year, and over the next 10 years it is going to be like 100. And if you look at this offset policy, these are going to continue to be serviced till 2028 by a rough estimate. Therefore, we looked into what should be this professional staff, how should DOW look like, how should we enhance the interagency coordination. Is very, very complicated. The MSMEs in particular find it very, very difficult to enter into this particular game. How do we simplify? How can an interactive net be established by the DOW? How do we select the Indian offset partners? Related to this comes the FDI. How much of FDI? What about total subsidiaries which are coming in? There should be a retrospective application of this particular policy, and it should not be confined beyond June 2030. What about the contracts which were given an acceptance of necessity before that? And more importantly, how is this whole thing going to get monitored? Plus, how do we do this single bid or single stage 2 bids. That is evaluation of the technical evaluation and then the commercial evaluation of the particular offset, and how do we have a continuity so that the offsets per se don't derail the entire acquisition process. So there were a lot of loose ends, and we in our analysis have tried to put this across. And I suppose at that particular time the Ministry of Defence also got pretty active to look into the existing offset policy, and I believe, though it hasn't got promulgated, something like the 7 recommendations that we have made, 5 of them today find place in the government's new offset policy, which may come through, but it has been discussed in the Defence Procurement Board sometimes in March 2014, like the retro aspects, your selection of IOPs. You see, a particular vendor who has to service this, he says, if I have to service this over 10 years, it's very difficult for me to lay down the timing. So how do you go year by year, a year in advance, etc. Whatever we gave, somewhat or the other, also found a favorable thinking in the MOD, and I think the new offset policy is going to be largely covering whatever has been given here. Towards the end, we can take on the question answers or big suggestions towards the end. But one thing which I wish to state, and this is my personal view, is that the offsets globally have had a mixed success. They haven't succeeded in all countries. Very few countries who were very determined when it came down to defining offsets what they want, rather than leaving it to the vendors, to having a very professional bodies with the law firms actually being there to sign the contract or assist you in signing the contract, as also having a very powerful team to monitor, plus also giving them the vendors who are giving you offsets, and if the healthy offsets are coming, then the multiplier effect, which also of course finds place in our present thing, being given. So the Chinese are doing this. Turkey has done it very well. Brazil, Korea, there are a couple of countries where it has succeeded, but in many countries it has failed. And I believe India should not be deterred by its past failures or failures in other countries. We must continue. I believe the offset should be raised from 30 to 50% of the cost. In case of MMRC, we are doing it. As also getting in the Ministry of Law and Justice to go and frame the wordings of the contracts wherever we got to go in, as also bringing in more professionalism where the down W is concerned. More on it as we get along, but this book in that particular chapter covers the net assessment of the current offset policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General JP, for giving us a very good overview of the offsets. As you well know, the next important aspect as far as the defense industry or the defense procurement is concerned, the defense industrial base. And we will now have Vice Admiral Anup Singh giving us how self-reliance can be achieved by setting up of the National Defense Industrial Base, part of the book which has been covered very extensively. Vice Admiral Anup Singh.
Thank you, Rahul. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just been given an introduction by General J.P. Singh. But I think the crux of the entire problem of the procurement system in India lies in the fact that we do not have a formalized defense industrial base. So, my idea would be to present to you the problem and its only solution as it applies to India. Now you know that the screen colors change, so obviously you know there are going to be some pictures. I had about 100 slides to be covered in 5 minutes, but don't get worried because of the temperatures that they are outside. I've reduced them to 12, which should be okay insofar as comprehension is concerned. To start with, what is this term? what is this term defense industrial base? Told what about the caption below that, military industrial complex. Actually, the term the phrase defense industrial base has its origins in political science after the last industrial revolution in the United States. And the idea was to formally start a chain for servicing the armed forces in such a manner that firstly there are no voids insofar as the defense of the land is concerned. Secondly, there are no problems insofar as the life cycle of hardware is concerned. So the definition at the time, as propounded by the United States, was it is the government's industrial assets which are able to supply and service the armed forces of the state, which meant the assets that were to produce and maintain, apart from supplying spares, any weapon system for the armed forces were to be government controlled, or that there was nothing like a private sector envisaged in those days. But after the Second World War, wiser senses prevailed, and this definition was formally revised to read words to the effect: the worldwide industrial complex, not just in the United States, and didn't say public sector or private sector, the worldwide industrial complex that would be able to supply, after doing research and development, design, production, delivery, maintenance and supply of spare parts as required by the armed forces of the United States. The reason I put the caption military industrial complex below that is because that is another term that is used by some of the countries like the Soviet Union and now the Russian Federation. We don't like to use that term insofar as the seminar and the book thereafter in the VIF is concerned, primarily because there is a slight stain applicable to this term as per an incident in the 50s in the US Congress. And therefore, there was an element of corruption that was brought in on the part of some senators. We use the term defense industrial base. Now, let us take stock of the national potential as it exists insofar as producing hardware or weapon systems for Indian armed forces. Look at this graph. It applies to the years 2010-11 and has been produced by CPRI. You will see that the graph spikes at $5.5 billion insofar as India, Germany and Italy are concerned, and so far as imports are concerned. But to Germany and Italy or any part of Europe, or for that matter the entire Western world, it doesn't really matter what is that element of import, because they've got stakes almost everywhere. For example, Germany would perhaps have stakes in Finmeccanica, which is based in Italy, and in Eurocopter and so on and so forth. The Eurofighter is being produced, as you know, by many European countries, putting their investments in it. To our country, this figure has hardly changed over the last decade and a half. And perhaps today, because of the declining value of the rupee, this element must have gone up rather than gone down. Look at this graph. It shows that insofar as India is concerned, 70% of its capital acquisitions every year are through imports. Why does this happen? This happens because psychologically, the definition which was propounded by the United States pre-Second World War, without having had any reference to it, remained in our mind the true scenario as it should apply to India, which is entirely incorrect. It is not because it was thought that only public sector undertakings and government's industrial assets are to be responsible, but it was thought it will be the exclusive preserve of only these establishments to provide hardware to the armed forces, as firstly, national security and secrecy is involved, and secondly, nobody else will have the capability, nor will the government be or the services be able to provide designs or details of what is required in hardware which is required by the defense service. So as of now, we have 9 or now the 10th defense PSUs and 40 ordnance factories. What do they produce? Before that, the question, what is the strength of their skilled and semi-skilled manpower? 180,000 for these establishments. 180,000 skilled and semi-skilled manpower. That should service the entire EU and beyond, including exports. Our problem is, we have to be honest with ourselves. We missed the industrial revolution, therefore, we did not harness any technology, nor were we allowed to receive any technology, even in contracts where TOT was listed. Let us be fair to the system and to ourselves. All TOT contracts which had clauses for TOT were actually industrial arrangements, or at best screwdriver technology. DRDO labs. We have 50 plus DRDO labs. They are a great asset. But once again, the denial regime in this world has denied true technology. Now, if it comes to reinventing the wheel in almost anything and everything, it is being foolhardy. Therefore, technologies which have not taken root in this country, despite sufficient R&D, should actually be accepted by direct import, much better than direct import through joint ventures or contracts where certain stakes are sold to the foreign vendor, and he is asked to transfer technology, including setting up assembly lines or establishing joint defense shipyards. Now, you all must have heard that the Navy has had a head start insofar as self-reliance is concerned. That is primarily because, to start with, 3 shipyards were nationalized in the 60s. The 4th one, HSL, has just been brought into the fold of the Defense Ministry. They have had, on the surface, great amount of success. Today, a warship includes 70% by volume of its inputs entirely indigenous. But by value, 35 to 40% in a destroyer, frigate, not a non-weapon platform, or an aircraft carrier, are still imported elements because of propulsion systems, weapons, and some sensors. We are proud that most of our sensors have been indigenized, either through some sort of TOT or by the direct efforts of DRDO and institutions like Bell, ECIL, etc. So many of the sensors, including in electronic warfare and some radars, have been completely indigenized. But then, our defense shipyards, once again, have been suffering because of the problems of national or nationalized culture, which is the work culture of the labor. And therefore, there are far too many folks in these establishments. Advanced technology has been resisted, and infusion of technology where funding is available has not been possible because of various constraints. So we take 10 years for the leadership, even today. That was the case in the 80s. Even today, we take 10 years for the leadership of a new project to be rolled out from the time that the first steel plate is cut. In the case of an aircraft carrier, it will be much more. Any country, from South Korea to Japan, let's not talk of Japan and America, South Korea to now China, of course, the quality may be suspect, takes about 42 to 48 months for the leadership to come out. This is a great record, and they've broken that record over the last 15 years. That is what we need to finally achieve. How do we do that? Not just in the Navy, but in all 3 services. We can do that through JVs or through asking for foreign principals to set up their assembly lines with the promise that firstly 49% has been allowed insofar as FDI is concerned. You will also be permitted to export from it. What is the state in the private sector? Majority of its output is directed towards supply of inputs in terms of raw materials, unfinished products, components, devices and spare parts. Large industrial houses, at least 9 of them in this country, starting with L&T, Tata's, Godrej, Mahindra's Defence Systems, etc., Bharat Forge, have had weapon licenses apart from industrial licenses. But they have hardly won any bids because it's been a process of either nomination or no trust, nomination or defence case. Some private shipyards like Pipavav, L&T, Bharti, etc. have started bidding for warships, but the only contract that has been allowed till now is for offshore patrol vessels, not true weapon platforms. Reasons for low participation by the private sector, level playing field, we all know about it, it has not been the case till now. DPP 2013 promises a lot, let's see now what happens, and we have great hopes that after the announcements that have been made by the new government, things will change. Some things have already started changing because of decisions made in the last 2 weeks. Nomination should completely be a no-no hereafter. We have a whopping 6,000 in the list of micro, small and medium enterprises in this country who've been given industrial licenses. 6,000 of them. The whole of EU may not have that. But the problem here is we do not have a concept of hub and spoke cycle. In any country, the SMEs form the supply chain for dedicated weapon systems, platforms or auxiliary systems for the OEM. We do not have that concept. So what are the MSMEs doing? They are either developed as vendors by the services because of problems of denial regime, or by PSUs, or by large industrial houses in the private sector. Only components, subcomponents, as I have said. Overall, all big ticket and small enterprises in this country contribute to only 10% of the entire production system which is required in the capital budget. Is there a panacea? Yes, FDI TAP has finally shown great results, particularly in the recent announcement. It's gone to 49% in any case, and beyond that on a case-to-case basis. Hopefully for certain things like, let's say, bulletproof jackets or that. I'm just taking arbitrary examples. There should be no problem in allowing even 100% FDI. Because that's the incentive. That is what will attract foreign players to come and set up assembly lines. After all, it is the private sector that has helped push the economy after 1990, after 1991. Automobile sector, electronics, software, name it. Therefore, capabilities there, we all know it, the world knows. Ensure equal opportunities to all stakeholders, all players. How do we do it? Efficiencies. It is no secret because this graph has come out of the annual survey of industries from the Ministry of Finance annual report for DPSUs of the MOD and the MOD in the year 2010-11. It shows defense public sector undertakings having an average output per person of only 15 lakhs per annum. All other Indian industries are at an average of 30 lakhs, as you can see the red line. And of course, two sectors, I think, of computers and automobiles have gone up to about 40 lakhs. Everybody knows what is the reason. There are 3 guys in a defense PSU where only 1 is required. For example, a vendor into a systems, and of course, child handling. Technology infusion, skill upgradation, PPP model between private and public sector undertakings, and setting up of defense special economic zones which will also promote exports, and organize MSMEs which are completely disorganized and in a sector which is just not looked after. What will be the spin-offs if you do all this? You will have development of strategic autonomy, true strategic autonomy for this country, economic independence, political independence, because denial regime to be a thing of the past. If you have states for principles from foreign firms setting up assembly lines, huge job creation opportunities, and a hub and spoke concept that I have already spoken about in a true DIP. Yes, it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Anup Singh, for giving a very comprehensive survey of our defense industrial base existing and what is proposed. We are also very fortunate to have in our study group certain very honored members of the private industry. And now I call upon Sri Satish Kaura, Chairman of and Managing Director of Central Group, to give us a perspective from the private industry. Mr. Kaura.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry I have not prepared a good presentation like this one. I spoke to Janavik 2 days back, and he requested if I could put in perspective of the industry here after a few minutes. I very briefly like to make a few points. We in industry are actually very encouraged at this point in time, especially after Prime Minister Modi made a big push for Make India. I think the whole desire, the whole understanding that we need to get our manufacturing going in the country. It's not only defense, it's all across. And the thrust that is required, and the opportunity that exists in defense, it's quite clear that the government is now starting to look at it quite closely. Added to that, when you look at some of the recent decisions in MOD on the acquisitions, one can feel that there is a very strong push coming in the coming period to create a defense industrial infrastructure, and that's one reason we are very excited. Also, I think we met here in July, I think, for a seminar. I understand that they are now getting ready in the next few months, in the very near future, with a new DPP, as well as offset guidelines. And these would be much more comprehensive than even 2013. And they are looking at some of the issues that we've all been talking. So you can see the speed at which the evolution is taking place, the speed at which the policymakers are trying to address the issues to get us all to move. And this is one of the reasons I said when we look at it, we feel quite encouraged from the industry. Now, I want to make a few points. One is, there is generally, I find when I go around, people saying private sector is not investing enough. Private sector does not appear to be seriously committed to the defense sector. I think we have to keep in mind that the private sector is looking at this opportunity very seriously. But as was explained a little while back, private sector will feel much more encouraged if there is a clear visibility of what's going to happen. People talk about the fact that the government is willing to give an order, and I keep on saying the order is good, that will help private sector get into an area, but then private sector wants to see beyond that, wants to see what is visibility long-term wise. If private sector makes large investments, it wants to see clarity in policies, clarity in thinking. That's evolving, and this is why one is encouraged, but I think you have to be patient, because as the system will evolve more, policies will become more clear, you will see private sector come in with a lot more commitment in the future. The other thing is that we are all aware that the domestic market is limited, and we've been talking about the need to go after the exports market. So if somebody enters the defense arena, he wants freedom to go after the overseas markets as well. You can see this government is right away in real earnest has started to address. They have just announced now the new export strategy. How that will come out, the details, and it's quite clear they are focused on the fact that they want to actually support, unlike in the past, export of all defense hardware. I'm aware that the PM has been talking to everybody in the sector and saying, why can't we export? So his mind is quite clear. We will do everything policy-wise, make sure that the framework is in place, and that will create the market. It will not be the domestic market, it will also be the export market. And this will also change the whole thinking very, very significantly in the coming years. The other aspect that we've been worrying that is not getting enough focus, even though we talk about the make procedures, and that's very good news, is that we are not spending, there is not enough thinking on how do we create centers of excellence in certain technologies. And I'm talking about, we need to nurture for years these, either in private sector or public sector, developing basic technologies in certain areas. These centers of excellence could be in areas like we talk about, in the aerospace area, we talk a lot about engines. We need to think about how we are going to develop, how we are going to invest money, and how we are going to nurture these capabilities. We can talk about electronic warfare. We're talking about all kinds of sensors. And there's a real need to develop some in-depth world-class capability. We can look at electronic warfare. So these will require identifying companies, nurturing them, helping them build technology bases with orders, support, and there's some policy framework required. I know in the next policy, DPP policy that's coming up, they are addressing some aspects of this. And let's see what comes out, but there's a great hope that this will help push to private sector funds for technology development and further on some orders as the technology is developed. So it's a long-term approach being thought of on how to make these procedures much more friendly and much more easier for private sector to develop these capabilities. Without that, you can't put platforms together. You'll continue to import these technologies and then do platforms. So we need to think both platforms as well as subsystems and technologies that I am talking about. I think we just talked about the fact that a lot of what we do in the country so far has been on TOT, which is basically just getting what I would call the know-how, which is how to manufacture. We get processes, tools, and we put things together. We know how to manufacture, but we do not know the know-why, how to do modifications, how to do improvements, how to do innovation. So we need to be thinking also very seriously about IPR. When we talk about, we are setting up manufacturing facilities, and mostly we are doing it with technology coming from outside. The control over the technology remains overseas. So our freedom to actually use that technology for various aspects is limited. We have to keep that in mind. Apart from the fact that it creates all kinds of other, I would say, space problems, freedom problems on what we want to do with this technology. So we need our own technology is my point. And we need to focus, while we are talking manufacturing, we need to also continuously think we must encourage manufacturers to develop technology. DRDO has done a great job, and DRDO can partner with industry, but DRDO can't remain the only source for technology. We have to have our manufacturing setups, investing money, and government has to provide support. There is something happening. 100 crore has been provided in the budget, even though it's token, but it shows thinking. They are serious that we should provide funds to industry to do technology development, and that is key as far as defense is concerned. Defense is high technology area, and it needs technology development, and that's where I think private and public sector both have to focus much more with government support. The last point I want to make is this. I think I find in the last few years we've come out with a whole slew of policy initiatives, but I think the dialogue between the government and the stakeholders, and especially the private sector, is not as good as it should be. I'm sitting here and telling myself we are discussing 2013 DPP, but I don't know whether there is enough, and this is a very valuable work that has been done by this foundation, and there are more folks doing this kind of work. But the dialogue with the decision makers, the intensive discussions that are required, I'm not sure what is the quality of these dialogues that are going on. So when 2014 is coming up, we are all waiting to see what it will have. We really haven't had any open dialogues with the decision makers. And this also is a big cultural change required, because that will make sure when the policies come out, they are actually effective, they can be implemented, and they'll have the impact that's required. It happens in all other sectors of government when policies are made. But here, I think in defense, this is the change that we all need to push for, that there should be an openness in discussions on when we talk about new policies. Thank you.